Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hillary. Jerry Leisure is the CEO and founder of Officium Labs based in Silicon Valley, California. Officium Labs has created a CX marketplace that blends traditional BPO operators as partners with independent gig workers, allowing them to offer a highly flexible CX service that does have elements of the gig economy, but also has elements of traditional CX. In this role and earlier in his career, Jerry's been closely linked to the games industry. So in this interview, we focus on exploring how the CX marketplace works, how gaming companies are calculating the ROI of their CX spend, and how Jerry thinks CX will look in the new normal after COVID-19. And I need to make a brief apology because right at the beginning of this podcast, you can hear my dog Joe bark once. We're all on lockdown here in Brazil, so clearly everybody is trying to manage work from home. I hope it doesn't ruin your enjoyment of the podcast. I could have overdubbed the question, but then I think you'd still rather hear me talking to Jerry. Okay, now I know that you've created a CX marketplace, which, when you're looking at it from the outside, it sounds a little bit like Uber for contact centers. Could you maybe summarize how that works?
Yeah. So when we came up with the concept of, really thinking through how to decentralize customer service as one of our core company tenets, we wanted to bring the value together of workers and clients. If you think about like a hub and node concept in a mesh network. And so on the outside, it probably looks a little bit like Uber for customer service. I think on the inside, the way that we think that it's a little bit different is if you think about kind of the Uber model, you have a very simplified workflow where a bunch of people do the same workflow over and over and over. And again, it brings value to the consumer. Whereas our marketplace has multiple workflows. So you can have a frontline customer service person, you could have like a training manager, you could have a workforce manager, you could have a director. So you got kind of simple to complex workflows that sit inside the marketplace. And then instead of being B2C, which is what Uber is, it's kind of a B2C, B2B model that's kind of meshed and hybrid. So that's one first key component. It's a little bit different. The second one is in the Uber model, they generally use independent contractors for the entire platform. And so we believe kind of in the CXCS world, you need a hybrid of both kind of independent contractors, full-time employees, as well as BPO or consulting partners that make up the entire marketplace. So it's kind of a hybrid of different types of workers that are kind of positioned and brought, to the clients as one unified force. And then the last bit that's a little bit different is that we do more of a hands-on management with the clients themselves, as opposed to obviously in a B2C environment, it's relatively automated, the relationship between Uber and their end consumer. So I think those are the big three differences, but the concept itself of kind of on-demand customer service at your fingertips when you need it for during the hours, when you have spikes, when you have issues, challenges, burst capacity. All of those core tenets are very similar.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking about as you described it. Are we looking at a solution that fixes that problem of seasonal spikes, like retailers with Black Friday? Or is this like an ongoing sort of mainstream alternative solution?
I think the answer is yes, right? So the way that we set the marketplace up is first that we can handle burst capacity spikes, and we have the ability to deal with a 10x spike, 20x spike, 30x spike. We oftentimes find in the video game space that there'll be a particular time or window when spikes will happen. It's usually around an event that's happening in the game. Let's say you'll go from a normal volume of 100 tickets an hour to maybe 800 tickets or 900 tickets that last for like 4 or 5 hours, right? So being able to staff up to those particular spikes are super important, and then staff back down. So we have that layer where we can staff up and down really fast. And then for some clients, they want more kind of a core customer service integration integrated into the burst capacity. And so that's where the other part of our marketplace can come into play, where we recommend BPO providers who can provide that core, and then we just plug right into that core and operate as one integrated team.
So I understand then. So if you're partnering with a BPO, that would create the core of the service. And so you'd have the kind of onboarding and the ongoing training and quality. But then for everybody that you're bringing on, in the more flexible gig type environment, how do you ensure that all of these people are trained and able to offer the same kind of service?
Yeah, so we follow the same exact process as a normal BPO would, right? The entire kind of flow that you might imagine, from recruiting, training, qualifying, it's all the same. The only kind of caveat that's a little bit different is, in order for a human being to retain knowledge, they need to do something consistently, right? And so if the spikes in volume for a particular client don't happen as often, then we lose that knowledge. And so one of the things that we've instituted is, with our workers, usually it's like, if it's been 2 weeks or so, then you're kind of starting to degrade knowledge. So before they get back on, each kind of week or two, they have to recertify their knowledge to ensure that they can then continue to service the client and so forth. And so all of that's automated and it's done online. That's how we ensure that knowledge retention can stay there.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you mentioned a lot of these examples are from the world of gaming. So gaming gets a lot of spikes. And we had a conversation about a week ago, and you were telling me about how you managed to actually prove with data that investing more in CX can lead to direct improvements in gaming. So things like player spending goes up.
That's right.
They spend more time playing the game. How do you sort of measure that and put those numbers in front of the boss of the gaming company then?
No. I mean, it's a great question. The answer is actually really simple, but the execution is a little bit more challenging. So essentially, what you need to do is just have a unique ID that spans all the databases, from the game to the CRM, AI, any database capability that you have, right? If you have that unique ID, then you can start to do correlative analysis through data science. And then if you follow that correlative analysis over time, you'll start to see trends. And then as you see data points that start to trend together, maybe they have a decent R-square correlation, then you start to experiment in cohorts. And you say, hey, well, with this cohort, let's A/B test this thing and see how that updates or changes or influences spend, play time, session time, anything of that nature, decrease in churn, all that kind of stuff. So then you can track it, and then you experiment. And then as you experiment, you start to see that R-square become tighter and tighter. Maybe it gets above a 0.8 or a 0.85, which means it's highly correlative, highly predictive. And then once you get to that point, then that's when you know that, hey, if I invest in CS in these ways, then I'm going to get this output in revenue, playtime, session time, decrease in churn, whatever the measurement is. And so there's been several companies that we've worked with, and by setting up our trademark service stack, which is a part of our service stack, is the analytical layer that we call Rev Up, that correlates these data points. Then it allows a video game company to say, oh, wow, so I always knew service was important, but now I know service is important either through the bottom line, through how the players are engaging with the games, or that we're keeping players playing the game that they chose to love by downloading and playing it.
Yeah, and this could apply to any industry as well, couldn't it? It's not just
gaming. It's anything with a digital database, right? It doesn't digital purchase and digital database and digital tracking of customers, right? Yeah. So it'll be harder for some of the old hardware businesses, but anything that's online, any product it applies to. We have customers today that we're leveraging in the logistics and the delivery space that use it. We have customers in the healthcare space that use it in all kinds of different ways, right? Because it all comes down to, how does the business determine product success with the customer? And then how correlative can you make that with the investment you're making in CS? So it'll be a little bit different, but anything with digital footprint, digital connection, digital data, you'll be able to do that.
Yeah. So long as you can always identify each individual customer at all stages through the journey.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I mean, I think that what you've been describing is a more flexible approach to customer experience. We're talking about flexibility, handling spikes, gig economy, work at home agents. and this focus on ROI that we talked about, because quite often that's often a big problem. People say we're spending all this money on CX, but where's the ROI? And it just seems that we're looking at a much more complex environment. The new normal that McKinsey is talking about, and all the big advisory firms are calling it the new normal. I mean, do you think that maybe the kind of aircraft hangar contact centers are going to struggle in this kind of new environment?
Well, I think so. If we parse that out into two answers, if that's okay. So the first one, I think the old school, contact centers are definitely going to struggle depending on how long coronavirus and COVID impacts, the way we work, right? So I think putting that kind of aberration to the side, just in general, if you think about the way that people want to work, since 2007 and the recession that hit the globe, we've seen just a boom in independent contract work or independent consultant. I think it's 51% or so that Forbes said, people are now claiming to have a second job, a second gig, or independently working, versus back, I think 2007, it was less than 14% or something. So the mindset of people are saying, hey, this is how I want to work. This is how I want to engage, with the economy. So that's changing significantly. And so I've kind of been saying for a long time that these, large call center companies need to start adapting and integrating to work from home. And in fact, I've had a number of conversations with kind of some of these bigger companies. And in my conversations, they're like, oh, it's not time. It's not right. We're not going to do it. And so what's been interesting is Corona has fast forwarded, and pushed them out of that mindset. And so now you have companies that are like, oh, we're work from home now. We're moving. We're engaging. We're doing that. So I think that, the people were already headed that way. Like the trends were headed that way, right? And now that you have kind of this pushing force that makes it happen because of government, laws or edicts or whatnot, then they're heading that way even faster. And I think what will be interesting is when these larger contact center type companies, which are super valuable, but when they notice that, hey, actually, we could get an ROI by letting people work from home or tapping into resource competence that's not 25 miles away from our contact center, I think that's going to be super compelling and super valuable. And so I think the landscape post-corona, because of these two different variables, is going to be much different. I do think that there also is going to be kind of this transformation or revolution in work from home technology capability when it comes to GDPR, CCPA, compliance, security. I think there's going to be a host of new products that are going to be created so companies feel safer letting their workers work from home. Specifically in Officium, what we've set up is we essentially kind of have this, hey, we don't trust anybody's Wi-Fi. We don't trust anybody's computer. So we have a virtual private network that's set up on a VDI that's two-step authenticated, best in class. No, you can't get into it without that security component. You can't copy and paste anything from our VDI which is like a virtual desktop. For those that don't know what VDI is, from the virtual desktop, to the home computer, everything's done in that container. And then once it's closed down, it can never be accessed, and it's kind of hack proof. And so that's how we, protect our customers, our clients, and then obviously protect the agents from something accidentally happening on their side of their network that they get hacked or whatever. So I think there's definitely some security pieces that you think about banking, you think about other financial institutions, you think about law firms, government. Those would be areas where like, hey, this has to be really secure if I'm going to work from home. And so I think there's actually going to be a little bit of a disruption and some new products that come out around that. But I do think, to answer your original question, I do think they're going to struggle unless they adapt. I think there's always going to be a place for big centers in some cases, but they're going to struggle to adapt. And if you almost look at it like the market's 100%, and maybe today work from home is 5 or 10%. Maybe work from home becomes 20 or 30%, right? And then maybe in 20 years, it gets to 70 or 80% to a point where we just kind of transition over time. Unless we have like 5 coronas in the next 5 years, which would expedite it to move even faster.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. Please take a moment to review the podcast because this helps other listeners to find it. And if you have any suggestions, then get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm at Mark Hillary with 2 L's, or just search Google for Mark Hillary.